You know, for most of my 20s, I had a quiet rule I lived by. If someone asked for help, I said yes. Not sometimes, almost always. I believed that being the kind person, the dependable one, was something to be proud of. And to be honest, people reinforced that idea all the time. They would say things like, "You're so easy to talk to. You're always there for everyone. You're the nicest person I know." And when people say those things to you often enough, you start to build an identity around it. You start to believe that being that person is part of who you are. The problem is, identities can quietly trap us if we never question them. And I didn't question mine for a very long time. There was one particular moment, though, a very ordinary afternoon that made me see myself differently. I remember it very clearly. It was a Wednesday. I had just come back from a long day. My mind was tired in that dull way that comes after hours of meetings and conversations. All I wanted that evening was something simple: a quiet meal, a long shower, maybe an early night. Nothing dramatic, just rest. I had barely put my bag down when my phone rang. It was a friend of mine, someone I cared about deeply, someone who, over the years, had become used to calling me whenever something came up. And when I answered, her voice had that slightly rushed tone people get when they need a favor. You know the one. She explained that she needed help with something small. At least, that's how she described it. A quick favor, just a little help. Nothing complicated. But as she spoke, she kept adding details, and the more details she added, the clearer it became that this small favor would probably take most of my evening. Driving across the city, helping her sort something out, waiting while she finished something else, and then probably driving back home much later than I had planned. Normally, I would have said yes immediately. That was my pattern. But that evening, something different happened. Instead of answering right away, I hesitated. Not for long, just a few seconds. But in that small pocket of silence, a very honest feeling surfaced inside me. I didn't want to do it. Not because I didn't care about her, not because I was angry, but because I was exhausted. And the strange thing was, that realization surprised me. Because up until that moment, I had never really allowed myself to acknowledge that feeling when people asked me for help. I usually skipped right past it. But that evening, I noticed it clearly. That quiet voice that said, "I really need this time for myself tonight." And the moment I noticed that voice, another thought followed right behind it, a slightly uncomfortable one. I realized this wasn't the first time I had felt that way, not even close. There had been many evenings like that, many weekends, many moments when I had rearranged my own plans, my rest, my energy to accommodate someone else. And most of the time, no one had even asked me to sacrifice that much. I had simply assumed it was my role to do so. The conversation on the phone continued. My friend was still talking, explaining why she needed help so urgently. And while she spoke, I sat quietly, holding the phone, feeling something slowly shift in my understanding of myself. I began asking myself a question I had never asked before. Why do I feel responsible for everyone else's comfort? It wasn't resentment. It was more like curiosity, like discovering a pattern in your life that you had never really looked at closely. Eventually, the moment came when she finished explaining everything, and she asked, very casually, "So, could you come help me tonight?" I remember taking a slow breath, and for a second, the old instinct rushed forward, the automatic response. Yes, of course. But then something inside me paused again, and I heard myself say something different, something very simple. "I'm really sorry, but I can't tonight." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't harsh, just honest. There was a small silence on the other end of the call, not an angry silence, just surprise. because I almost never said no. She asked if everything was okay. I told her I had simply had a very long day and needed to rest, and after a moment, she said she understood. That was it. No argument, no damaged friendship, no catastrophe. But after I ended the call, I sat there for a while thinking about what had just happened, because something inside me felt different, lighter. Not because I had refused to help someone, but because I had listened to myself. And that moment revealed something important. For years, I had believed that being kind meant saying yes whenever someone needed me, but what I was actually practicing wasn't always kindness. Sometimes it was fear. Fear of disappointing people, fear of being seen as selfish, fear that if I stopped being endlessly accommodating, people might value me less. It's an uncomfortable thing to admit, but I think many of us recognize it when we hear it, because approval can feel very similar to connection, and sometimes we work very hard to maintain that approval without realizing how much of ourselves we're quietly giving away. The truth is, most people aren't trying to take advantage of us. They're simply responding to the pattern we create. If we always say yes, people assume we're happy to say yes. And unless we show them otherwise, they have no reason to think differently. That realization changed the way I thought about boundaries. For a long time, I believed boundaries were something rigid, something that pushed people away, something that made relationships colder. But I began to understand that real boundaries do the opposite. They protect the space where genuine kindness can exist. Because when you give from obligation, something inside you slowly hardens. But when you give from choice, the generosity feels real. Over time, I started practicing something new. Before agreeing to help someone, I paused, just briefly, and I asked myself a simple question. Do I genuinely have the energy for this right now? Sometimes the answer was yes, and when it was, I helped gladly. But sometimes the answer was no, and slowly I learned to respect that answer too. What surprised me most was how little the world actually changed. The people who cared about me still cared about me. The friendships that were real remained steady. The only thing that truly changed was the way I felt inside my own life. I felt calmer, more balanced, less quietly resentful. Because resentment is what eventually grows when kindness has no boundaries. And resentment is dangerous, not because it explodes, but because it slowly drains warmth out of the relationships we once valued. Learning this took time, and I'm still learning it, honestly. But that ordinary Wednesday evening, when I finally said no and allowed myself to rest, became a quiet turning point. It reminded me that kindness doesn't have to mean self-abandonment. It doesn't require us to disappear inside everyone else's needs. Real kindness includes yourself in the circle. And sometimes the most respectful thing you can say, to yourself and to someone else, is simply, not tonight. I'm curious about something. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you were giving too much of yourself away just to keep everyone comfortable? Maybe it was a small moment. Maybe it changed the way you see your relationships. If you'd like to share, I'd really love to hear about it. You can leave your thoughts in the comments. Reading your reflections is one of the most meaningful parts of this space. And if you enjoy these quiet conversations, moments to slow down, cook, and reflect on the little lessons life teaches us, you're always welcome here. Subscribe to GistOver Cooking so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, take care of your kindness, and remember to leave a little of it for yourself too.